going to warn you right now. I'm about to make a statement that you better not jab someone near you, all right? Have you ever met someone that's overly sensitive? Yeah, see, now you know why I gave you the warning. Jackie's okay. No one's sitting by her. She didn't get a jab anyone. But have you ever met someone that's just, all of their feelings are right there on their sleeves? You say, good morning, how's your day? And they go, why? What have you heard? Right? They're just overly sensitive about everything. Hey, I really love your hairdo. What's wrong with it? No, they just don't want to believe. Now, if I say that to someone, there's a reason they're saying what's wrong with my hair, because I'm usually poking jokes at people, right? But this is the type of person you can't poke a joke at. Because if you do, they're going to just a puddle of blubber, right? Their day is ruined. Well, if you're going to be a leader, you can't be oversensitive. Because if you're going to lead, there are going to be critics out there. It's just a fact. There's going to be someone that's going to tell you that they can do it better, that they know more, that you didn't say that right, or you didn't do this right, especially as a pastor. Oh, pastor didn't come to my birthday party. He didn't go do this. There's just always someone picking at you. And the old saying is, you better have a pair of iron shorts if you're going to be a leader, right? Because everyone's just going to be nipping at your backside. They're just going to be trying to get at you. Well, today, we're going to look at Nehemiah. And Nehemiah had to have thick skin. Now, thick skin isn't just something that happens from being a leader for a while and you develop those leadership calluses. I'll speak to that. That's true. Again, I own my people pleaser streak. Some comments and stuff when I was younger, like last week, would really get to me. When I studied this week, I realized they need to not get to me. But, as you grow as a leader, you develop those calluses of realizing that there's always going to be people nipping at you, and you kind of let it go. But one thing that helps leaders, good leaders who have thick skin, is that, like we talked about last week, they know who they are in private and they've spent time with God alone. See, a lot of us, and it's become a trend in our society, we no longer have private times, do we? Well, yeah, I do, Pastor. I had private time just yesterday. Just me and my phone and Facebook and Instagram. We had a great old time. Guys, that's not private time. That's the problem. We can't sit and allow God to bring things to our memory about the day or the week or things that maybe we need to work on because we have this device with us. I'm just as guilty everywhere we go. How many of us, how many of me sit in front of the TV with their laptop on their lap and their phone in their hand? Guilty, all right? Just think about what we've become. I'm not that old. Some of you think I am. I'm not. But there is a time that if you wanted to talk on the phone, you had to have a cord attached to it and you had to stand in the kitchen, right? And if mom and dad were rich, they bought this cord that would go 20 feet and you could walk around, right? I remember the day we got the 20-foot cord. Woo! We had a living room here and a dining room here, and the kitchen was here, and the phone was right here on this pillar wall, and you could walk around and come back to the phone with that cord. It was amazing, right? And it didn't last a week. The kinks kind of came out of it because someone pulled it too far, and it came back together all weird. But guys, we seem to be attached to that. There's going to be critics if you're going to lead. And God, hear this, God wants all of us to be leaders in some way or fashion in His church. How do I know that? Well, Paul talks about it. I know we're going to be in Nehemiah 4 here in a minute, but in 2 Corinthians 4, verse 7, let's read what Paul tells the church. He says, we have this treasure in jars of clay. Now, are jars of clay very sturdy? Is clay sensitive to heat and cold? And if you drop it on a hard surface, what happens? It breaks, just like Humpty Dumpty, right? And all the king's horses and all the king's men, even, what's that stuff that guy sells on TV? Flex Seal. All the Flex Seal in the world ain't going to put that thing back together the right way. All right? He says, we have this treasure in fragile vessels, is the idea, to show the surpassing power that belongs to God and not to us. God uses us because he knows we're fragile, and he knows when everyone else looks at it, they're going to go, man, there has to be something in their life. That can't be them. I know them. They're a mess up. They're a screw up. God goes, yeah, I can use the worst part of everything and make it come out for good. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not driven to despair. There's the opposition. There's the critics. Persecuted, not forsaken. Struck down, but not destroyed. There will be conflict and there will be issues as long as we walk on this earth. Always carrying the body, the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our bodies. Opposition, guys. Paul is telling the Corinthian church, you'd better be ready for it. And God takes all of it and he uses it to further the gospel of Jesus Christ. Guys, I want you to hear this. We are plan A for this side of the cross. God doesn't have a backup plan. If the church that Jesus Christ gave his body for and that Jesus established, if we don't show the love of Christ, if we don't share the gospel of Jesus Christ, not just with our actions but with words, if we aren't sharing it, there's no other way for people to know about God and get to heaven. How do I know that? Well, Romans is clear. How can they know unless someone sends to them and talks to them? Well, what about the pygmy in deepest, darkest Africa, Pastor? How's he going to know about the gospel? The same way everyone else was, through the internet. I'm kidding. If you're truly searching after God, I guarantee you he's going to send someone your way. Want proof? Look up the story of Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. Ethiopian eunuch is seeking after God, reading the scrolls. God taps Philip on the shoulder and says, I want you to go to this intersection. I want you to meet this guy because he's been searching after me. If you're searching after God wherever you are, God will provide someone to come give you the gospel of Jesus Christ. Unless you think it's untrue, the Bible is clear. There's only one way to heaven, and that is through Jesus Christ. Not through a higher power, not through a better person. It is through Jesus Christ. In Nehemiah chapter 3, we see a long list of who works on the wall and where they work. Now, I'm not going to read through the list, but that list is there to let you know that Nehemiah did not do this job himself, and he did not part out the work to all of those horsemen and all of those soldiers he brought. The people of Israel that were returned to Jerusalem, they did the work, and they got the wall and their houses rebuilt. And he notes who did what in chapter 3. A long list of people that got active and worked. But if you notice in chapter 4, verse 1, as things are going, as things are coming along, the critics will always show up just as you think things are going well. Now, when Sanballat heard that they were building the wall, he was angry and greatly enraged and jeered at the Jews. To a critic, and this may even be, honestly, a self-evaluation tool for yourself. To a critic, change is a threat. To a critic, change is a threat. They like to be in control. They like to know what's going on. And see, if things change, they either have to learn and adapt, or they lose their grip or their power. See, this change that was going on in Jerusalem threatened Sanballat and Tobiah's power. They saw it as a threat. Nehemiah 4:2. And he said in the presence of his brothers and the army of Samaria, what are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore it for themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they finish up in a day? Will they receive the stones out of the heaps of the rubbish and burned ones at that? Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him, and he said, yes. What are they building? If a fox goes up on that wall, they will break down the stone wall. You need to know this. In my concealed carry class and my self-defense classes, when I teach it, I have a phrase. It's not original to me. It was something I was taught. But rats travel in packs. All right? You see one beady-eyed, furry, disease-carrying thing, there's going to be another one. Critics travel in packs as well. You know why? because they're not bold enough to stand on their own feet. They've got to have someone around them jeering them on and talking it up and reasoning together to try and come up with a solution. See, Satan, we talked about this on Wednesday nights in our Bible study, Satan seeks to counteract what God is doing. God has given us truth through His Word. He's given us absolutes. He's given us things to live our life by. And what does Satan come along? He counteracts God's truth with this thing that we like to call reason. Right? I hope you know the difference between truth and reason. Reason is, well, you know what? God wants me to be healthy and happy, right? Who's going to say no to that? Well, I would, because the Bible actually says we will have trouble. But who's going to say no to that, right? God wants me happy. Yeah. Well, right now I'm not happy and I'm not wealthy. Yeah, I see what you're saying, Scott. So why don't we go down to the corner, and I know this guy that'll give us some drugs, and for a little investment, man, we can make a lot more money. And after all, we'll give 20% to the church. Forget 10%. We're going to honor God in our little schemes. See, reason pulls us away from God's truth, and we can reason anything away, and it'll pull us away from God's truth. When you're in a pack of critics, they will come up with reasons why you should say this, why you should do this, why you should think this. That's why they have to be in packs. Oftentimes, you'll hear someone say, people are saying. People are saying is a way for a critic to feel like he has a pack or she has a pack. When oftentimes it's what they think or what they believe. They were getting bold in their criticizing. Notice they weren't just criticizing Nehemiah, but they were criticizing his workers. So how does Nehemiah respond to these critics? How does he respond to Sanballat and Tobiah and their whole rat pack? Well, first of all, Nehemiah talked with God about the issue. Every week in my messages on Nehemiah, we always end up in the same place, don't we? Nehemiah goes before God with his issue. Now, I want you to see this. I want you to see what he does. This is an awesome prayer. Hear, O God, verse 4. Hear, O God, for we are despised. God, they're coming up against your people. We're trying to do this work, trying to reestablish the temple, get Jerusalem secure again. We are despised. And he says, turn back their taunts on their own heads and give them up to be plundered in a land where they are captive. Does that sound very loving? Does that sound very kind? Do not cover their guilt. Basically, Nehemiah is saying, when they ask for forgiveness, don't let them have it. Do not cover their guilt. Let not their sins be blotted out from your sight, for they have provoked you to anger in the presence of the builders. Nehemiah does not go to his little prayer closet, get on the internet and Facebook and Instagram or whatever, or even get on his phone and start texting their friends and say, you know what they said about us? Nehemiah does not go out and try and reason and grab his own critics of Sanballat and Tobiah together. Instead, what Nehemiah does is he goes before God. And I love how open and honest he is. God, hey, they're trying to stop the work that you're doing. They're coming against us with everything. They're trying to be discouraged. They're trying to cause confusion. God, don't let them get away with it. Don't ignore their sin. Let it fall down on their head. Let this stuff come back. Nehemiah, instead of going to his friends and talking bad about them, he takes them to God and lets God deal with them. Nehemiah is straight up and bold in his prayer. He prayed before God because he knew God could take care of it and God would respond. Notice in Proverbs 15, verse 28, the heart of the righteous ponders how to answer. This isn't the first time we've seen Nehemiah spend time in prayer. When he talked before the king and the queen, remember? Before he told them what he needed, what he wanted, he said, I prayed to my God. Nehemiah takes time to ponder how to answer. But the mouth of the wicked pours out evil things. The Lord is far from the wicked, but he hears the prayer of the righteous. Nehemiah responds, first of all, to all of his criticism in prayer. The second thing Nehemiah does is he stays on task. He stays on task. Notice verse 6. So we built the wall, and all the wall was joined together to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. Nehemiah, because he didn't respond and start yelling insults and try and get a gang to go over there and say bad things about them or their mama or whatever it would be to try and get back at them, because he had a positive attitude and stayed at work, the people he was leading stayed on task. Nehemiah was cool, collected. Nehemiah, being a leader, I'm sure, had to fight those instincts, because any leader will tell you when you are challenged or when people lie about you, your initial instinct is to get back at them, isn't it? Get that press release out. Go on Facebook. Go on the offensive about them. That's not true about me. But Nehemiah didn't do that. He took it before God and he stayed on task. Let's read on, verse 7. When Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs and the Ammonites heard the repairing of the wall of Jerusalem was going forward, and what the breaches were beginning to be closed, they were very angry. They were very angry. Why would Sanballat and Tobiah and them be angry that the walls were being fixed and the breaches were being closed? I have a feeling that these guys had sinister motives and were swindlers. I think they were sneaking in at the night, stealing stuff, taking stuff, whatever they wanted to. They had open access to Jerusalem. They could walk, come and go. Their little corral of people, kind of like an old Western. Their little guys would go in there and take what they want and have their mask over their face and then leave. If the walls were cleared, they wouldn't have run of the city anymore. They couldn't come and go as they wanted to. There'd be an accounting. There would be protection for the people. I don't think they like that. Notice, let's finish verse 8 there. And they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause confusion in it. You know the biggest thing that causes confusion and why they said, let's come together against them? Is fear. Is fear. We've just come through several years of fear over this virus. And I'm not saying the virus isn't happening, because it's still here, guys. People are still getting sick with it. People are still dying. Not as many, but they're still dying. But fear is a big motivator, and when it causes confusion, people can step in and they can have their way. How about what's going on in our world today? There's still a war in Ukraine, right? Old Putin's rattling his saber saying, I'm going to set off a nuke. Man, there is fear, and it can crush us if we listen to it. The enemy wants to get fear because it will divide us and get us fighting amongst each other. Well, you wear a mask and you don't. You took the shot, you did. We start fighting each other instead of dealing with what we need to deal with. That's the enemy's ploy. That was their ploy. Hey, let's tell them we're getting a big army against them, and let's look like we're going to come attack, and they're going to have fear, and they're going to start fighting each other. We won't even have to do anything. Notice Nehemiah's response again in verse 9. It's like we've seen this before. And we prayed to our God and set a guard as protection against them day and night. Nehemiah prayed, and Nehemiah kept at it. So what can we learn from this story of Nehemiah today? Well, first of all, it's impossible to lead without facing opposition. It's impossible to lead without facing opposition. Pastor, that's not true. I'm a leader, and right now, man, everything's peachy. There's no opposition. I promise you, if you are a leader and if you are truly leading, there is opposition. You're just not seeing it right now. There's a gossip train going on. There's someone who's figuring out how they can affect your leadership, or how they can cause division in your ranks. If you're a leader and if you're being effective, trust me, there is opposition. The second lesson we can learn is that it's essential to face opposition with prayer. It's essential to face opposition with prayer. Prayer gives the burden to the proper person, which is God. God, you need to take care of this. God, guide me how to respond correctly. It's that whole, count to 10 before you respond. Well, we'll spend 10 seconds, 10 minutes, whatever it takes in prayer, till you calm down and you're ready to respond in a way that's productive. We need to respond and face opposition with prayer. Let God do your dirty work. Nehemiah didn't yell at them, yo mama jokes. He didn't tell them that their camel's hump, looked like a pond. He didn't go on to all these jokes or whatever. He let God take care of them. The third lesson we see from Nehemiah is prayer is essential. Get this, but not all that is necessary. Prayer is essential, but it's not all that is necessary. See, there's a lot of people who want to say, I gave it to God. Whoop, I'm going to sit back and let God take care of it. God, we have this financial need in our home. Man, we're working 40 hours a week, and yet it seems whatever we do, I'm sure a lot of families are in this. With inflation, gas going through the roof, it just seems we can't make ends meet. God, I need you to step in and intervene and do something in our life. And you sit back, and your bills keep getting behind, and things keep getting worse. But I prayed. I gave it to God. Pastor told me to pray and give it to God. Remember the second part. Prayer is important, but it's not. We still have to keep working. Maybe for a time, if we're in financial crisis, for a short time, we need to find some extra jobs to raise that extra money to take care of things. We don't plan on it being forever, but God expects us to do what we can to meet those needs. We play a role in God's mission, and we have responsibility for our lives. Prayer is essential, but it's not all that's necessary. We need to keep doing our part. Leading is a difficult task, but it's worth it. I want to close with a quote from Teddy Roosevelt. In one of his speeches, he wrote this: "Far better is it to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to take rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy much nor suffer much, because they live in the great twilight that knows not victory nor defeat." Some of you are afraid to take chances or afraid to lead or to even follow God into areas because you're afraid that you will fail. Pastor, if you knew my life, you knew that everything I touched just fell apart, you would know how all of these efforts that I've tried, this stuff would do. Great men have failed and failed tremendously multiple times. How many of you use WD-40? Some of you know. Some of you great mechanics and stupid mechanics like me. How did WD-40 get its name? It was the 40th formula, right? And it's a water displacement formula. It is not an oiler, for those of you that are using it wrong. A lubricant. It is water displacement formula 40. The guy failed 39 times. What if he'd have quit at 37? What would we do with our rusty bolts and nuts and our door hinges in our house? They'd keep squeaking, wouldn't they? Guys, I could go on and on about stories of failure, but they kept pressing on. Guys, no matter how many failures you have in your life, God can use that earthen vessel to bring about glory and honor and see amazing thing in your life. And you will never experience the joy of influencing others and leading until you're willing to take the failure, willing to take the criticism, and watch God work through you, even though you don't think you're worthy. I've said it before through this series. Every person here, if you've accepted Christ as your Savior, you have a role to play in His church. Every one of you. And some of you that haven't joined a church or haven't got involved, I understand, but I'm here to tell you that God's church suffers when we're members or when we're supposed to be there and we don't give our talents and gifts to God. Because what happens when someone doesn't pull their weight? Someone else has to pull more. Someone else has to do more. God has given us everything we need to do the mission here in Keys, Oklahoma. Some of it we're not active in yet because God has yet to bring those pieces, or those pieces have yet to step up and be willing to see what can happen when they trust God to work through them. In spite of the failures, in spite of our past, God can still work through it. Leadership. If you're going to be a leader, you got to take risk, and it's going to hurt. Well, Pastor, I don't want to take a risk. I don't want to get hurt anymore. I'm tired of it. I'm just going to sit here, sit on my laurels and my morals, and everything will be okay. Leave me alone, and I'll leave you alone. I'm going to leave you with this. Nothing in this life stays the same. Nothing. When I was a kid, this amazing product come out called Hubba Bubba. Hubba Bubba for 5 pieces of great, delicious bubble gum that was better than double bubble because it lasted longer. Cost me 15 cents a pack. I loved it. I don't like the strawberry watermelon, though. It didn't taste good. 15 cents a pack. I remember as a kid when it went to 25 cents because I was devastated because I had scrimped and saved and got 15 pennies together to buy Hubba Bubba. Guess how much Hubba Bubba cost a pack now? 75 cents. That's all. On Amazon, if you buy it in a case. I'm just saying. It probably is $1, but I'm trying to be real. It's 75 cents if you buy a case of 20-something. All the talents, gifts, and abilities that God has given you, they will waste away if they're not invested and if you don't keep working them and keep using them. God has gifted you with something to do. Every one of you. And I hope here at Keys Baptist Church, or if you're just visiting, whatever church you're a part of, you are actively engaging and watching Christ work through an earthen vessel, mainly because, honestly, we all need you to be engaged. There is someone that needs you. You are that encouragement to them. You are what they need to take the next step in their walk with Christ. Don't let the critics get you down. Father, I want to thank you so much for your word. I want to thank you for the example of Nehemiah that pushes and challenges us all, but also challenges us as leaders. Criticism can be heavy, and it hurts because none of us want to hear the worst about us, but it also hurts because we're trying to do good, and yet people want to twist it. And that's Satan's job. He's accuser of the brethren. He wants to discourage us, but man, it's hard sometimes to lead. This morning, as I studied for this message, I know you've asked me to make changes in my life and what I do here at church. And even as deacons, we talked about it this morning a little bit. But right now, we're gathered as a church, and we heard your word. And I can't help but think that there's some people here that you've been messing with them. You've been gently prodding them, and it's time for them to step up. All of the past, all of the terrible things that happened when they tried to lead or whatever happened, they need to be let go, put on those iron shorts, and get back in the game for Jesus Christ. We have this confidence that even though we're fragile vessels, you can use us to be a part of mighty things. Father, I pray for those who have leadership positions in their work and in their homes. Father, that you would help them to stand firm, that when these opposition comes, that they take time to pray and take time to think before they react, and they lead well. Father, for those of us that think we don't have a leadership position, well, we're followers then, and we have a responsibility to pray for and follow those leaders that you've put in our lives. We have the responsibility to learn to be leaders and to be a part of the team. Father, and if there's someone here today that if they walked out this door and something happened and their eyes never opened again and they don't know if they'd be in eternity with heaven with you, Father, I pray that they would get that figured out today. Come talk to me or one of the deacons or an elder and find out from your word how they can know that if they leave this earth, they will be with you forever. Father, thank you for the gift of your word. Thank you for the gift of the local church where you allow us to engage in your plan A for reaching this world with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Thank you that our failures can be turned into victories because you are all powerful. Thank you for using fragile vessels like us. In your name I pray. Amen.